Digimon the movie was apparently not liked very much. Among the whimsical and chaotic swirl of late 90s and early 2000s media, Digimon the movie was something that I always held in my heart as a classic. I genuinely went through a phase at one point where I'd watch this movie at least once a week. I loved it, and I always assumed that feeling was unanimous. Digimon the movie, a paragon of millennial media. So it was super confusing later down the line, when I was a teenager with access to the World Wide Web, to hop on a bunch of forums and see that the sentiment towards this movie was pretty negative. 1 star on Rotten Tomatoes. To be fair though, I don't trust the reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes. Those people just hate everything. But yeah, I was like, what do you mean? How can you not like this movie? It had a great origin story section for the adventure protagonists, an epic internet battle with Diaboromon, and I hadn't even seen the Adventure 02 anime, and even the later half of the movie was still perfectly comprehensible to me. What was people's issue with Digimon the movie? As I read on, I was eventually educated on what this movie actually is. It actually isn't a movie at all, or it wasn't intentionally created to be like this. Digimon the movie is actually a spliced up amalgamation of 3 separate Japanese Digimon features, which blew my mind, because I would have never noticed that if you hadn't told me. I actually found myself feeling kind of impressed by how the producers blended these 3 short films together into one pretty cohesive movie. Well, cohesive to me anyway. Evidently a lot of people had vastly different opinions. A lot of people do feel like this is too obviously 3 separate pieces of media, awkwardly cut down and smashed together. It was maybe even a bit blasphemous if you were on the ball and had already seen the original Japanese versions. That was actually another thing I thought of on the other side of the argument though. I was like, damn, so Digimon the movie could have been like twice as long? Did we straight up lose out on half the content here? But I believe budget constraints were something to do with why it was cut down to that magical 90-minute mark. Plus, it was a time where you had a lot of popular franchises dropping 90-minute feature films, Pokemon being one of them. Undoubtedly, they wanted to try and capitalize on that. So with all this in mind, I'm questioning everything. So I had to watch it again, just to redigest and have a little ramble about it. And watching it again, I guess I did feel the tonal whiplash between the segments. Whether that's because I was intentionally looking for it now, and focusing in on the transitions between sections, I also found myself looking for gaps, where things could have been cut out to trim the runtime, which is no way to watch anything. I would not want a critic's job. But perhaps controversially, I still think it holds up. I think the shift between the second and third sections is the most noticeable, because we changed protagonists, completely changed setting. It was always going to be insanely difficult to make these 2 segments feel fully natural flowing into each other. But they just about made it work. Remembering that this movie was primarily for kids, as a kid I never suspected a thing. I actually feel like something that helped me with it as a kid was clocking the very brief mention of Willis in the Our War Games section of the movie. Willis seems like he was introduced very suddenly, and we don't get much context before all the action starts kicking off. But I remember being like, that's the guy from earlier. We've flipped over to his perspective now for this next part. But very easy to miss. To a lot of people, it probably was like, who's this guy? What's the deal here? This is all moving a bit fast. There were complaints that it was too Americanized by the soundtrack, which I totally get. This movie's blend of turn of the millennium ska and pop punk is about as yeehaw as you could get, but you can't deny that it's a banger soundtrack. This is probably my favourite soundtrack of any movie ever. It just makes me think of summer as a kid. It's such an uplifting, party at the beach vibe collection of songs. I actually still associate All Star by Smash Mouth with Digimon the movie. Shrek does not come to mind at all when I hear that song. I just picture Wendigomon swaying from side to side. Also, one thing I always adored about this movie was the jokes. The little one-liners that are sprinkled throughout that aren't even meant to be a punchline in any way. There's no emphasis put on them. They're barely even jokes. They're just little quips thrown in as offhand comments here and there. Some of the best ones coming from Ty's mum, and my absolute favourite from a random truck driver.
Did you see that?
No, I was sleeping.
But you're driving!
These jokes are where it's plainly obvious that we're not using the Japanese source material. and maybe it is overcompensating a little bit to try and appeal to Western audiences, but they did a good job of entertaining us for sure. Looking back now, I can see both sides pretty clearly. It is undeniably messy, it sort of uncohesively stumbles through a cut and stick narrative, but at the same time, it has this scrappy charm to it, even all the way down to the art style. I'm pretty sure it was the debut of Omnimon in the West. That was a really hype moment. It explained to us kids in the West why Kari knew who Koromon was when she saw him in the Digimon Adventure season, and all the battles in this spliced up monstrosity, if you want to call it that, felt really big and cinematic and high stakes. There is a case for the movie potentially alienating people who don't have an invested interest in Digimon. Like, if you haven't watched the anime before this, there are references and mechanical aspects that will just confuse the hell out of you. But I've always assumed that that is the one single barrier of entry to watching feature film adaptations of anime series. You have to be a fan of the series. Pokemon was exactly the same. I remember when the first movie came out, the most common complaint from parents that took their kids to see it was we had no idea what was going on at all. I don't know, I just would never want the first 30 minutes of a 90-minute anime movie to be reintroducing and catching everyone up on all the characters and the story details and what this means, what that means. It just seems like a huge waste of runtime. I see feature-length anime films like these as extensions of the series, sequels to the series even. That's probably a better term. Critics are probably always going to dislike this movie, especially if they're on the pulse with the Japanese side of the franchise. That seems like a trend, to be fair. If you're tuned into the Japanese side of Digimon, you're probably going to feel underwhelmed by the Western adaptations, because Western Digimon dubs have historically been an afterthought, you could argue. Or rather, sacrifices were made with the source material to appeal to Western audiences. A little bit of censorship too. I'm not particularly well versed in it all, but I've only ever known the English dubs so far. I hopefully will get around to watching the subs at some point, because I've had multiple people trying to point me in that direction for a while now. I will always love Digimon the movie though. It probably is a nostalgia thing at this point. I'm not even going to try and argue my way out of that when it is a very real probability. But for me, this movie caught a very specific kind of lightning in a bottle. It caught all of that weird, offbeat, millennial era energy, and smushed it all into one piece of infinitely rewatchable media. It's loud, and it's messy, but it was one of those generational pieces that just worked for us as kids. But I'm sure you guys will have plenty to say about this movie. Are you on the more critical side of the argument and think this was an abomination of sorts? Or are you a starry-eyed millennial who jammed out to this on their old TV VHS combo system back in the day? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments. While you're there, please do drop a like on the video, it's a big help. Subscribe for more Digimon content. Thank you so much for watching, take it easy, I'll catch you in the next one.